Hello and welcome. My name is Jack Quinlan. I'm the Senior Laboratory Assessment Coordinator at AASHTO Resource. I am joined by Kim and by Mike Wagner, who is one of the program managers for the Laboratory Assessment Program. Today, we're going to be taking a behind-the-scenes look at assessment scheduling. And I do want to emphasize that this is specific to AASHTO Resource. This presentation will not cover CCRL inspections. So here's our learning objective, which hopefully aligns with everyone's expectations for today. Attendees should have a better understanding of what goes on behind the scenes at AASHTO Resource to schedule an assessment and how to ensure scheduling goes smoothly. So I thought it would be helpful to go through how the AASHTO Resource Assessment Tour moves across the country. So we do have a methodical way that we move across the country. It's not just random spots, random states here and there. This will mainly apply to laboratories that are currently accredited. I'll have more information for laboratories that are seeking accreditation later on in the presentation. Generally speaking, our tour moves from the East Coast to the West Coast and then finishes up in the northern states and Canada. I do want to mention we have a few contractor assessors in the southeastern states, parts of Texas, Northern California, Northern Nevada. These contractor assessors are kind of on their own schedules. They do their own tour cycles. So they don't necessarily follow that red arrow that I'm showing there, but the process for scheduling assessments is still the same. So I want to mention with this map that you're looking at now, we have a colored in map on our website. It'll show state by state which states we're currently doing assessments in and which states we're planning on being in the coming future. And there's the link to that page on our website. So now that we've gone through how the assessment tour moves across the country, I'm going to get into what happens when your state is next on our list. So everything starts with our 6-month projections. We do this to help us figure out when we'll need to start feeding new assessment requests into our queue so that we can keep our assessors busy. We'll refer to that same tour map that I just showed to pick out the next state or states that are on our list. We'll then compile a list of laboratories in those states and send them all their first canvassing email at about 4 months out from when we're planning on entering that state. And a canvassing email here, it's just a standard email that we send out to laboratories that are in our system, asking them to submit an assessment request. So it's our request for your requests. At 2 months out, we'll send another email out to any stragglers that didn't submit a request after that first notice. And then finally, about 1 month before we begin assessments in a particular state, we want to have all requests from laboratories at that point. So I do want to emphasize that you're not expected to just submit a request unsolicited. It's a common question from labs is, how do I know when to submit a request? We'll contact you. Some labs think it's, a 2-year cycle and that their accreditation expires after 2 years. That's not the case. As long as you have your assessment when we canvass you and when we reach out to you for your assessment request, you won't have any issues. Before I get into what's involved with scheduling individual laboratories, I want to mention that just because we start conducting assessments in your state during a certain month, it doesn't necessarily mean that your laboratory will have their assessment that month. For our 31st tour, we completed 2,012 unique assessments. We're currently on our 33rd tour. Just looking at Michigan here by itself, which is for us a medium-sized state in terms of the number of laboratories, we have about 65 assessments to get done in Michigan. So it generally takes us several weeks to get through a medium-sized state like Michigan. And then for some of our denser states like California, where we have hundreds of labs, it'll take us several months to get through. Just looking at all the labs, on this map of Michigan, I just thought I'd give a little detail about how we pick and choose which ones go first. Our assessors are instructed to pick and choose labs that have what we call higher intervals. So that just means it's been longer since they've had their last assessment. So if it's been for lab A, it's been, 33 months since their last assessment versus lab B, where it's been only 26 months. Lab A is going to get priority. They're going to get bumped to the front of the line so we can get them done. All right, now we'll go over what happens when your assessment request form is submitted, going through scheduling individual laboratories. So we have an internal calendar for all of our laboratory assessors where they plan out their travel dates. And this gets updated by our assessors every 6 months. So this is an example. It's an Excel spreadsheet. Every assessor has a line, and I'll sit down with them every 6 months and populate which weeks that they want to be out on the road traveling for. Generally, most of our assessors do 2 weeks at a time, sometimes 3. So generally, they're out for 2 weeks and then they're back in the office for 2 weeks. So at this point, we're not scheduling individual laboratories. We're just kind of getting a rough idea of what the schedule is going to look like, and we'll populate their travel blocks later on. So it's 7 to 8 weeks prior to an assessment trip is when I'll go back into that spreadsheet of the assessor's schedules. And then I'll start populating that schedule with specific states, cities, or even specific laboratories. So like for Jerry there, I assigned him to go to Ohio. We're actively conducting assessments in Ohio. So Jerry is going to go into our system and pick out, like I was saying, labs with those higher intervals, and he's going to try to schedule them first. 5 to 6 weeks out from an assessment trip, an assessor will begin to put together an assessment calendar, which looks something like this. So it's kind of like putting a puzzle together. We have all sizes and shapes of labs, and it's up to the assessor to piece them together as best they can. So like I was saying, most assessors travel for 2 weeks at a time. So Jerry is looking to fill 10 business days here with assessments. So like I was saying, he's looking at the higher interval labs first, and then he's also looking at geographically where those labs are located. So you might have 2 high interval labs on opposite ends of the state. It doesn't make sense logistically. It's not a good use of Jerry's time to be driving back and forth across the state to do those labs. So it's kind of like a balancing act of the length of the assessment, the amount of time it's been since the lab's last assessment, and then just geographically, if there's a group of labs that are going to be easy to schedule together. So at 4 to 6 weeks prior to an assessment trip, I will approve the assessor's calendar, and then an announcement letter will get sent out to each one of those individual laboratories on the calendar. And then the assessors will make their travel arrangements 3 to 4 weeks prior to leaving on their trip, which means they might actually be on the road doing other assessments when that is going on. So at that point, they're looking to make rental car reservations, hotels, and airfare. Right. So I thought I'd sort of line these two timelines up together just to give you an idea of how they're kind of related. So now that I've covered what goes into scheduling and assessment, I'd like to talk about what happens when you can't accommodate the date that we've scheduled for your assessments. So here's our current cancellation policy as of January 11th, 2024. If you're watching a recording of this webinar, I encourage you to visit the tests and fees page on our website in case there have been changes. So postponing assessments is handled case by case. Due to the amount of planning and the cost of travel arrangements, we really try to avoid postponing assessments unless there are very good reasons. Everything's case by case, like I said. If you do feel like you need to postpone your assessment, you're encouraged to just contact us, and we can talk through whether it's a good idea to do that, to postpone, or whether it might be better for you to just push through and continue with your scheduled assessment date. But we don't have a list of accepted reasons to postpone versus not. It's really just case by case. So if you're concerned, just call us and you'll talk to a person, and we're rigid but understanding. But things like a laboratory scale or balance being on the fritz, or a technician being out on vacation, are typically not good reasons to postpone your assessment. We assume that most labs aren't going to shut down work in these situations. So we encourage labs to keep those dates if at all possible. If there are significant unavoidable conflicts, then it's important to contact us as soon as possible to avoid cancellation fees, and we'll do our best to find you a new date. At that point, you'll be issued what we call a 90-day letter, which grants you a 90-day extension on your assessment. So that means you will need to have, not just reschedule, but actually have the assessment within 90 days of the original assessment date. But it's best if you know, as you're submitting a request, that certain dates aren't going to work for you. It's a very good idea to include that in the comment section of your request. If something comes up after you submit your request, you're always welcome to contact us and we can update your request for you so that we have current information about your availability. So now I'll go through what happens when you want an assessment outside of our normal tour schedule. And we refer to these as out-of-sequence assessments. Generally speaking, there are two main types of out-of-sequence assessments. One is an assessment for an accredited laboratory that would like to add new methods to their scope of accreditation. We refer to these as supplemental assessments, and these are typically done remotely via Zoom or Microsoft Teams. These are abbreviated assessments that only cover the new methods that are being added, and then any associated calibration or training records along with that. And just a note on these, if you have a supplemental assessment to add on a new test method, and then maybe 6 months later, like you didn't want to wait 6 months till your in-sequence assessment or however long that gap is going to be, you are still going to be expected to perform that test demonstration during your on-site assessment. The second type of out-of-sequence is what I would call a true out-of-sequence. These are for laboratories that are not currently accredited, but are seeking to become accredited and don't want to wait for us to come back around in sequence back to their state. We're generally a little more flexible with scheduling dates for these, but we do require a quality manual to be submitted before scheduling those dates. This is necessary so that we can verify that your laboratory has a functioning quality management system in place before we send an assessor across the country, only to find out that you don't. These assessments also come with out-of-sequence fees. These are subject to change, and as I mentioned before, you can always find our current fees on the test and fees page on our website. So the reason for the fees for out-of-sequence assessments is we're pulling an assessor away from an in-sequence location, which is going to slow down our progress there and inflate our intervals. And then it's also just less cost-effective for us to send a single assessor out to fly them out somewhere for like 2 days, as opposed to flying them somewhere where they're going to spend 2 or 3 weeks working. So for both types of assessments, supplemental and the on-site out-of-sequence assessments, the timeline for those depends on the availability of our assessors and the number of out-of-sequence requests that are currently in our queue. So that can change week to week. If you're curious about what our current time frame is, just feel free to contact us. So last, I have 3 tips for scheduling a smooth assessment. First, communication is key, whether it's leaving comments on your request, sending us an email, or giving us a call. If we know what your availability is before scheduling, it's less likely that we'll have issues. Second, bookmark our estimated assessment schedule page so that you are up to date on where we are. There's that link again. And third, when it's time to submit your request, make sure that you're submitting an accurate request. This will help us schedule your assessment for an appropriate amount of time. So we do have assessors go through each and every request that we receive from laboratories. And for accredited laboratories, the assessor is going to take a look at the request that was submitted and compare it to the laboratory's current accreditation listing and do a side-by-side just to see if there have been any significant changes. because that will alter the amount of time that we're spending at your laboratory. If you're dropping a lot of tests or adding a lot of tests on, that might, mean the difference between a 2-day versus a 3-day assessment. So if there are discrepancies, even things like maybe last time you just had AASHTO test methods, but this time you're requesting only ASTM test methods, things like that are going to put up a red flag for the assessor, and then we'll have to pull that aside, and then we'll have to investigate and contact you to make sure that those changes were intentional. So it's a very good idea to be proactive if you're changing your scope of accreditation, and let us know in advance so that we don't think it's a mistake, and so your request will get through our system in a timely manner. That's all I have. I think we'll open it up to questions and discussion now.
So I know we get a lot of questions about this, so I'm going to ask some questions and see if anybody else has any questions. But one of the questions I had was, how do we determine, you talked about it a little bit, but can you talk about more? How do we determine which assessor actually goes to what laboratory?
So that's a combination of things. We do actually train assessors. They're not trained on every single scope of testing, actually. So just based on what they've been trained to assess for, we'll kind of determine whether or not they're going to like an asphalt binder lab or just like a standard soils lab. So that plays a role in that. And then, like I was saying, it's really just their availability on top of that. It's just puzzle piecing together. We have a certain amount of labs that need to get done, and they're doing a certain kind of testing. It's finding the right assessor with the right availability to pair with those labs.
And so does the assessor have some free will and some choice of which ones they pick? So if there's like, is it like an early bird gets the worm, that the assessor that wants to plan it first kind of gets the top pick? But if you're an assessor who waited a little bit too long, then you kind of just have to do with what's left? Or that's an honest question for me, because I've never needed to schedule an assessment. So is there like you want to be scheduling it first from the assessor point of view, so you get pick of all of the labs? You can kind of pick and choose, or no?
Right. Yeah. So that's definitely, so all things equal, like I was saying, I'm looking when I'm approving calendars that they are selecting laboratories that have those higher intervals, and that they're not doing like an obscene amount of driving all over the place. But after that, it's pretty much up to the assessor. Like if I just assign them, Ohio, and I don't know, somebody's big Browns fan, then they might want to go to Cleveland. But yeah, they do have a lot of, I guess, free will over deciding where they want to go.
All right. I was just curious. I never really thought to ask that before. So thank you. Yeah. When you were talking about canvassing, I wrote a note down just to let all of our attendees know that it's really important that you keep your contact information up to date for your laboratory contact, because that's how we send out the canvassing emails, based on the contact information. So if you've had some turnover since your last assessment, it's really important that contact information is up to date for your primary and secondary contact, because that's who gets the email about canvassing. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I had that thought.
That's good, Kim. To follow up with that, if you ever have any questions, like if you're worried that we missed you or anything like that, Jack mentioned the link to the website that we have with the calendar and everything. You can also give us a call too. If you're worried, we're happy to let you know where you stand and when we're going to be in your area. If we're not there yet, we're happy to take those calls.
Thank you for that, Mike. I had another question that just kind of popped into my head. That this is going to be fun for everybody just to listen to these questions that I should know the answers to already. But with the canvassing, obviously, that's only the laboratories currently in our system that has had assessments in the past or is currently accredited, right? So it's not like if you're a laboratory only participating in the proficiency sample program right now, but you're thinking about wanting to do an assessment, how do they get kind of in our system to be canvassed when we need them to be?
Right. So we actually have a giant list of all the labs in our system, whether they're actively accredited or doing PSP only. So it's a process, it's a manual process of just looking at that list and seeing, if your lab that just registered for PSP, but you did it within the past year or so, we might include you in that canvassing email. But if you've been in our system for a while, just doing PSP, we're probably not going to bother you about filling out an assessment request. So in those situations, if you are a lab that just does PSP and you want to get into our system to be accredited during the next go around, I encourage you to reach out to us and let us know.
And then on the request form, if a laboratory or someone watching this hasn't actually submitted an assessment request form, there is a button or a checkbox, I believe, that says that you're seeking accreditation for that. And that will put you into the out of sequence thing that you were talking about. Correct, Jack?
Right. Yeah. So if you go to your home page, I believe it's on the left side of your home page, there should be a button that says request assessment. And then as soon as you do that, I believe it'll give you a couple different bubbles to click from. If it's a regular assessment, if you're looking to become accredited, or you just want an assessment only. Some labs don't want to go through dealing with the follow-up with the quality analyst. They just want somebody in their facilities to watch the tests, and then that's it.
So the request form actually defaults, I think, to receive accreditation. I believe you have to unclick the R18 button if you're just seeking an assessment without accreditation.
Oh, good to know. Thank you. So I had another question because I'm still not seeing that many questions come in. So I will be happy to ask your questions from the attendees if you type them in. But so I had a question, and Mike, maybe you'll be able to answer this. It's about what Jack talked about. It seemed to be only US laboratories and scheduling that. How is scheduling international laboratories different?
Yeah, it's a great question. Right now, the bulk of our international laboratories are in Canada, and we still maintain them on a fairly regular tour. So we'll canvass them, and they submit requests just like the labs in the continental US do. For anyone outside of the continental US, we kind of do them on we don't have too many. I think we only have 2 labs in Belgium. We try to do them. We do them at the same time, so we're not making 2 trips over to Belgium, although that would be quite nice. So we'll try to schedule them appropriately at 26 months or so together. Again, we canvass them just like we would anyone else. A new lab that's seeking accreditation, who is located internationally, they typically obviously will have to reach out to us first, and then we do have a different fee system for that. As far as the assessments, there will be additional costs. Mostly related to travel and everything like that. So there are some extra fees. So we will work with you and send out like an estimate of what the cost will be for that assessment, and you kind of work with you on those. Generally, those are kind of treated like a sort of like an out of sequence assessment at first, because they are outside of a regular assessment. Just like we did with the Belgian labs, though, we'll get you on that approximately 2-year interval.
Awesome. Thank you. Again, you guys are answering all the questions that apparently the attendees have because they're not typing them in, but I can keep going with some questions. So, how often, Jack, and I know the answer to this, so this is just for everyone else's benefit. How often is that estimated assessment schedule that's available online? How often is that updated?
Pretty regularly, thanks to you. So I will go through, have meetings every other week to discuss scheduling topics. And one of those topics that we go through is, do we need to update that tour schedule map? And if we decide we do, if we're moving into a new state, I will go ahead and let Kim know, and then Kim will go in and update that list. And that happens sometimes multiple times a month, sometimes just once a month. Like if we're in a bigger state, then it's just like, yep, we're still in California. I won't get updated so much, but yeah, generally once or twice a month, we'll update it. And even if there's nothing to update, we'll at least put a new date on it, I believe, just so you know that we looked at it.
Yeah, I will say that that checks out. You're accurate. I'm going to say yes, that is correct. It is about once a month that you send me that email, and that is something that I have to do is update that. So we do have a real question. There are people listening to this, you guys. We have a real question. So for a specifying agency looking to be an observer, let's break this down into two questions. Do we allow that? Do we allow a specifying agency to sit in and join an assessment with one of the laboratories that they're working with?
Not typically. If there was a situation where, something like this would come up, or somebody, a specifying agency, wanted to be there, we would have to get permission from the laboratory for an outside observer to be there, just because we do have confidentiality agreements with each laboratory that we assess. So it could be possible, but we just want to make sure we have everyone's full permission to do something like that.
So if there's a specifying agency that is interested of like, we want to keep tabs on this one lab because we're kind of unsure for some whatever reason, how would they go about handling that situation with us? Who should they reach out to kind of let us know that they may be interested in that kind of scenario?
Yeah, that's great. We do have a specifier function where specifying agencies can kind of get an inside look on some of the assessment activities. I'm not sure exactly if there's certain levels, if you can see the report or see how things have gone with the assessment and PSP scores and all that. But you can reach out. I think Greg Yorick is the one who really kind of does most of the work with the specifiers. So you can reach out to him, or really anyone here, and we can at least get you in contact with who you need to, as far as setting something up like that.
Yeah, I just put a link in the chat to the specifying part of our website, and it's ashtoresource.org/specifiers. But there are different availabilities or different accesses to specifier functionality and specifiers in general. So if you are a specifying agency that is looking to kind of just have an extra eye on a laboratory, we do offer some free tools that allow you to view more than just what's on the accreditation directory. That's available to everybody, and that's the public access. And we just did a podcast episode about this a while ago. That's why it's in my head. So I'm just giving you some information there. If I can find that podcast episode, I'll put the link to it in the chat as well. But there's the public access, and then there's private access that you can get from the specifier tools. And then you'll get a little bit more details about the assessment, and maybe perhaps if they're suspended and why they're suspended and things like that. But the private access, you do need to have permission, just like for the confidentiality that Mike was talking about. So I believe the episode that we talked about that on the podcast was about the confidentiality policy. We'll see how fast I can find that to share the link with everybody, but hopefully that answered your question, anonymous attendee. If not, you can always email Mike or Jack or myself, and we'll be happy to help you with that.
Kind of like a little bit of that part two of that question was like, how can you figure out like when their next assessment would be? Mm-hmm. I think some of the specifier functions would give you some of that information, but you can also look at our website too, that map, and kind of see where we are in the United States as well, to see what states are currently being assessed.
Yes, thank you. I just glossed over that last part. I apologize. So thank you for keeping me honest there, Mike. I did have a question going back a little bit as we wait to see if any other questions pop up. But Jack, you were talking about that laboratories can include on the request form, hey, this week is going to be a rough week. Please don't schedule the assessment this week. How is that information tracked? Who's looking at that? When is that being looked at for scheduling purposes?
So I'll look at it when I'm going back to when I'm populating that spreadsheet for assessors with where they're going to be at. If I'm trying to assign that specific lab to somebody, I'm obviously going to take a look at that and make sure I'm not including that specific lab on somebody's schedule. After that, if I just assign somebody like a blanket, Ohio, like the example was, and they go in and they're picking out labs, the assessors are expected to go down and read those comments so that they don't schedule something that would possibly pose a conflict. On top of that, I also, when I'm approving those calendars, I will actually go back in and double check that just to make sure we aren't scheduling something that's going to need to get rescheduled.
That sounds good. It's a lot of manual processes, but
yeah, a lot of clicking.
A lot of clicking. It definitely sounds like that. But I think that's nice to know that there are actual people looking at all of this information, and it's not just automatically being done and blindly being scheduled. So I think I like the fact that people are actually doing it. Did we miss anything? I don't see I have any other questions. Mike, is there any questions that you commonly get? I'm trying to think of ones that we've commonly gotten. Is there anything else that we haven't covered? Or Jack, were you expecting a question and didn't get it and want to share the answer with everybody anyway?
I would say just the most common question I get is, when is my assessment going to be? And generally, it's hard to pinpoint a specific date or even a specific set of weeks for that. Can be difficult. But if you are curious, you can always just call me or email me, and I'll give you my best estimates at the current time.
I like it. You're going to get a flood of just emails and calls of like, hey, when am I going to do this?
I'm ready for them.
Okay. Oh, we got another question. See, I knew if we waited long enough, people would start typing some in. So this person wants to know, where do Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico fall into the general rotation? I think Mike talked a little bit about international labs, but Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico are not quite international. By not quite, I mean not at all.
I'll jump on here, Jack, if that's all right.
Sure, go for
it. They kind of fall under their own little tour. We try to just hit them at approximately 26 months. So they don't really like necessarily fall behind any other state in the tour. We kind of just know they're out there. We know when they're going to come up on their 26, 27 month interval, and we try to get to them around that point. So they have their own little tour themselves. And
I do know, I think during a podcast episode, because now that's where all my knowledge comes from, co-hosting those, that we do not send assessors to Alaska during the winter. I do remember that we do have a specific time frame from them, but we aren't specific with other states, but Alaska we are specific with. Am I correct in that recollection, Mike and Jack, or Jack?
Yeah, historically that's correct. Just because the paving season is so short, and a lot of our Alaska customers actually shut down for the winter. So we try to stay out of there, and also safety too. For getting in and out of there, it can be a little tough in the wintertime.
I can not even imagine. I would not want to be a part of any of that. But that actually brings me to another question that I know we get a lot. Why can't you schedule our assessment during our off time? So
yeah, I was just about to say, Kim, so that's another common one where it's like you're always here in the summer. Why? And it's really just the way the flow of the tour. It slowly kind of shifts, or it's expected to slowly shift so that you're not having your assessment, every 2 years, the same month. So we try to spread that around so that not, a certain state isn't always having their assessments in the busy season. I don't know, Mike, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I just want to kind of go back to a number you put out earlier. In one of our tours, which takes approximately 2 years, a little bit more than that, we did 2,000 assessments. So, during the winter, we're not just sitting back here in Maryland or sitting down in Florida on the beach somewhere, taking time off. We're out doing assessments all year round. And We would love to be doing assessments in the, in the summer and or winter, just down in the warm areas, but we go everywhere all times of the year, and we're not playing favorites whatsoever.
Yeah, it's one of those kind of spreading the love of we're going to hit everybody eventually during their busy time. And then, but that also means eventually we're going to hit you when it's not busy. So it's just luck of the draw sometimes there, I think.
And that's why our goal is 26 months as opposed to an even 2 years. Because if we were doing every 2 years, if you were unlucky enough to see us in the summer, then you're going to see us in the summer all the time. So that's why we try to stagger it out a little bit. I'm sure, as most people on here know, we're not quite at 26 months yet. We're moving a little slower than that, largely because of COVID. We're still trying to pick up from that, but just in general, just trying to move quicker. But that's our goal, is 26, not 24, so we can, see you guys at different times of year.
Yeah, I think as you explained, over 2,000 assessments, when you had to take a pause for the pandemic, it's going to take a while to get back into the swing of things of where we were for sure on that. So, all right. I had no other questions that I can think of. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in through Zoom. If you don't have anything else that you want to say before we wrap it up.
Well, I was just going to click through here. I don't know if
perfect.
See, there's my contact info, and then I'll give you Mike's.
And you can find those and my contact information as well at ashtoresource.org/contact us. I put a link to that in the chat as well. And definitely the registration just opened this week for the technical exchange. So we are very excited about this. We are going to be in Massachusetts. Boston. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I can't. It's right there. I've been dealing with this so much. I cannot believe I just forgot that. I had total brain fart. But I really hope that everyone here can join us. Again, registration just opened. You can go to ashtoresource.org/events to get to the registration site and learn all about it. There is actually going to be a session about the laboratory assessment program in general and some Q&A around that. So if you hear a question, you thought of something after the fact, you can join us there and we can talk about it and see Jack and Mike there at the event. So thank you very much for that. And if you can't make it to the technical exchange, you can still connect with us in a bunch of different ways. I've mentioned the podcast a lot because I deal with that a lot, but you're also on social media, on Twitter and LinkedIn. You can find us on our YouTube channel. If you search AASHTO Resource, that is where a recording of this session and this webinar will be in less than a week, maybe tomorrow, maybe not. We'll see. So thank you very much, Jack and Mike, for joining us today. And thank you for our attendees for joining us as well.